Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Katie and today we are unboxing and creating with this month's SCRAWLRBOX. Before we get started, make sure you are subscribed and you have them beautiful notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any more videos like this one. Right, let's get to the box, shall we? So the print this month is by Tess Harris and I love the colour scheme there. And looking at the first items, which are Derwent watercolour pencils, I can see that some of those colours are in there. The candy we had was a boiled sweet with a soft centre, a little bit like what we used to have at my nan's house, and as I delve in further, we have 3 little pots of potions. I'll obviously go a little bit more in depth to the materials as I swatch them out. We also, of course, have the Scrawler magazine, which has lots of handy dandy tips in there too. Right, now it's time for the fun part of swatching things out. So we have an ivory black, a Prussian blue, as well as a terracotta for the Derwent watercolour pencils. Now, I've used the Inktense before, so I imagine them to be quite similar to how they operate. However, I found the colours just ever so slightly more subtle, and yes, they could be re-wetted. I also noticed that the black that we had was, I would say, verging more on a Payne's grey, as it did sort of have that blue undertone to it. But anyway, let's have a look at what's in these pots, shall we? So these are listed as Jackman's pearlescent watercolour pots, and they are described as magical, sparkling pearlescent watercolours. Now, before I opened these, I thought these would be a little bit either like a powder or a solid pan which had been poured into these little tubs. However, these are a wet mixture, which surprised me, but I don't mind. I mean, I have to bring it to life with water to get it like that anyway. It just saves me the job, right? The silver one had the most sparkle to it, but the pink and the green had a gorgeous colour and very much like what you would expect from watercolours as far as properties of painting are concerned. The paintbrush we have is a sea white round synthetic brush. I think we've had them before and I think it was in a size 6. And the watercolour paper we have is the Gold Line watercolour pad at 200 GSM, which is made from cotton fibres and cellulose. Well, as long as it works, I don't mind. The Scrawler Challenge theme is, I hope I'm saying this right, it's either ethereal entity or ethereal entity. I never know if I'm saying that right or not, so I do apologise. I used to read a lot of fantasy novels in my younger days and I always used to read that word as ethereal in my head, but maybe if I just don't mention that word at all for the rest of the video, you'll forgive me. So I thought I would draw my version of the Lady in the Lake, since as we're taking that fantasy twist, we'll say. You'll notice as I was sketching it out, I just used a regular pencil, which just so happened not to be packed, so of course I was going to use that. But aside from that little bit of cheating there, everything else has been made from the box. I'd crushed the blue and the black leads into a watercolour palette just so I could lift the colours straight out, and that is what I am using to fill in the background here. I quite like the texture it gives, especially on this paper actually, and it flowed quite nicely all over the page. I did try using a wet and wet, but like I say, I did mention these are a little bit more subtler than the Derwent Inktense, so I just end up using neat paint and then thinning it out afterwards. I added the blue first in most areas and then went over it in that black, and again, like I mentioned, it does have more of a Payne's grey quality to it, but I think that works really well against this blue, especially when it merges in with it too. Personally, preferences for me using watercolour pencils are usually on a flat piece of paper with no texture, so something like a hot press or a very thick piece of mixed media paper. For me, I feel like I get the best of both worlds using it on that kind of surface. I feel like the pencil adheres to the paper a lot better, but I can also change that up to a wash. But that is just my preference, and I do think they worked quite nicely on this paper too. But I do like a smoother surface. I just do. It's all preference. I made the lower portion of this picture a little bit darker just to give an emphasis of depth and kept it a little bit lighter at the top. And you'll notice as well that I added a border within a border using the washi tape there, because that just seems to be a thing right now that I'm enjoying. So, shall we talk about these little tubs of potions? So, the Jackman's Pearlescent watercolours. I'd never heard of them until this box, which is why I'm really enjoying Scrawl a lot just lately. They're throwing in items that I've not heard of or probably wouldn't try on a normal occasion, and it's really good to be able to try something new every month. I know last month it was a little potion bottle of liquid pencil, and I quite like that. And for these pearlescents, yeah, I quite like these as well. I can see them having a space within my art materials. Oh, when I can get to unpack them. I did mention earlier on in the video that the pink and the green don't quite seem to have as much sparkle as the silver, and maybe I needed to mix them up a bit more in the pot, but doing that would involve having to unbox something that I'd packed away just so I could stir it. So I didn't do that, I just used them as they were, and as a pigment they were really nice. Again, it's only going to have a small amount of pigment in there, and the rest will be mica as well as binding agents, so they are very subtle to use in a watered down sense. They layered quite nicely though, and I didn't want to mix the colours together as such, but layering them over one another, it worked out really nice to give some areas of tone and a little bit of movement to the fabric of this character's dress. Well, the Lady in the Lake's dress really. I thought using the pink would create a nice colour and be cohesive enough to give the impression of shadows and movements within the fabric there. Have any of you guys tried these paints before? Like I say, I'd not heard of them, and I'm not really sure where I can get them from. Obviously, I'm gonna stick that in Google at some point, just out of curiosity there. But like I say, how many of you tried them? What were your thoughts on them? What would you say they were similar to? For me, it's hard to decide what they'd be similar to. I want to say they are similar to the Ganzai Tambi metallics, but not quite, because they are quite opaque, I've found. Also, comparing them to other watercolours which have metallic or mica in them, again, it's hard to compare them to, because how they apply and obviously the format they come in is quite different, but it's nice and subtle, so maybe if I watered down the panned ones, I'd have a similar effect? I don't know, I might have to investigate this when I can. For her hair, I thought I would use that terracotta, and I used the pencil directly on the paper there, but only pressed on very lightly, as these pencils do just leave a smidgen of ghosting behind, of course depending on the texture of your paper. After adding the water on there, I introduced some of that pink shimmer in there, and I quite like it, it adds a bit of depth. I used an incredibly diluted amount of the terracotta for her flesh tone, but I wanted to keep her incredibly pale just to make her look a little bit more ethereal or ethereal, you know the one. And when it came to adding details in there, having the watercolour pencils was quite handy. Now, of course, the Lady of the Lake is known for, well, Excalibur really, and handing Excalibur to King Arthur, so it seemed just right to use that silver paint to paint the sword, and it really does sparkle in comparison to the rest of the picture. I used that pretty much as a mass tone, and the only water that was mixed in there was what was on the clean brush, and I really like it. It stands out, it's nice and it's eye-catching, and that's kind of like where I like to introduce metallics in there. I used the black pencil to give an outline to the whole character, as well as adding all of the details in there. I was in two minds whether or not to do that, or to try and introduce those details in using the paintbrush, but unfortunately that paintbrush was just a little bit too big for me to do that, so using the pencil it was. I do find this a lot with all watercolour pencils really, and obviously they are made from different kinds of clay to your regular coloured pencils, but I did find that when it came to doing details, if I applied just a little bit too much pressure, it did crumble quite easily. Again, for me, that's a common occurrence anyway, because I'm quite heavy-handed, but it was noticeably more because it's a watercolour pencil. So if any of you are heavy-handed out there, like me, just take it easy a little bit on those pencil leads. Although I must admit though, it did leave quite a nice, rich, deep black colour behind, so, you know, I got what I wanted to achieve there. So whilst past me is drawing on the screen right now, I thought this would be a good time to just say I'm probably not going to post anything up for a couple of weeks, just whilst I move house and unbox things. Don't worry though, I will record when I can, but it probably won't be up for a couple of weeks, so you could say this is just a little break I'm taking right now. Hopefully though, after everything is unpacked and we're all settled in, I will be back to a more structured schedule, so please again make sure you've got that subscribe button hit as well as those notifications, because it really does help this channel out. And also, a lot of you mentioned you'd like to see a studio tour once I'm set up, so I will be more than happy to do that for you guys. I'd quite enjoy it, and to be honest, it'll give me a good excuse to start being a little bit more organised with my stuff. Right, back to the picture. So I added just a few more details in there with the terracotta, which I activated with some clean water, and then I added an additional frame around the picture and filled that in using the silver and some of that crushed up black lead from the Derwent pencil. I don't know why I've sort of discovered this or rediscovered it, but it just adds a nice touch and kind of finishes off the picture and gives it a bit more definition as to where the boundaries are. Anyway, we have the Lady in the Lake, we have completed the June SCRAWLRBOX, and I would love to hear what you guys think. I want to say a massive thank you for watching, and if you're going to miss me too much whilst I'm gone, there are some videos on screen that I think you're going to enjoy. In the meantime, I'll see you on the next video from my new home. Bye!